Okay, let's be real for a sec. Staying focused these days, it's like a superpower,
It
right?
really is.
But what if we could actually train our brains, like to be less distracted? That's kind of what we're going to dig into
That's
today
good.
with this book, Indistractable by Nir Eyal.
Oh, I've heard of this one.
Yeah, and he's a former tech exec, so he knows how those companies, try to get us hooked.
Definitely.
And get this, we're going to talk about some pretty wild stuff from the book, like this novelist who goes to extreme lengths just to write without distractions.
Wow.
Then there's this trick hospitals are using to like stop people from making life or death mistakes with medication.
No way.
Oh yeah, and the secret to why those Slack employees are so productive.
Interesting. I'm ready to dive in.
Me too. So get ready for a deep dive into the psychology of distraction. And the best part is we're going to get some seriously actionable techniques you can, start using right away.
Love it.
Yeah, to like reclaim your time and attention.
It's so valuable.
So the book, it kind of changes the way we think about distraction. It's not about like hating tech or going off the grid.
Right, yeah.
It's about getting to the root of why we get distracted in the first place.
I'm with you on that.
So Nir uses this really cool analogy in the book. He's like, imagine blaming a pool cue for like sinking the ball.
Okay.
The cue's there, but it's the player who made the shot.
Makes sense.
Same with tech. It's just a tool.
Right.
The real reason we get distracted, it's deeper. It's in these things he calls internal triggers.
That's so true.
Oh, and speaking of internal triggers, Nir tells the story about his daughter. She like wanted to talk to animals.
Wow.
Yeah, because her parents were always on their computers.
Oh, wow.
It just shows you how much those internal triggers affect us, even when we don't realize it.
That's a really good point.
Mm.
It is really subtle sometimes.
Right.
That story. It really makes you think. Like anything we use to avoid discomfort, it can become, addictive. We turn to distractions like social media or video games to kind of escape, right?
Yeah.
But there are, healthier ways to deal with those feelings.
Okay, so how do we actually manage those internal triggers? I was fascinated by the techniques in the book.
Me too.
One that really stood out to me was time boxing.
Yes.
It's like planning your day, but based on your values, not just like your to-do list.
Yes, exactly. It's about aligning your schedule with what truly matters to you.
Right.
And the book breaks it down into 3 areas: you, relationships, and work.
Okay.
And when you're living in line with your values, you're less likely to need that, that escape through distraction.
So let me get this straight. If spending time with loved ones is important to me, I should like block out time for that, like actually put it in my schedule.
Exactly. Like you would a work meeting, yeah.
Huh. I can actually see how that would make a difference.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because it reduces those internal triggers.
Yeah.
You're proactively making time for what matters instead of just letting distractions kind of take over.
Oh, and there's this other idea I loved. It's called reimagining the task. You basically find ways to make it more enjoyable.
Yeah. It's like tricking yourself into focusing in a way.
Right. Like the fun jar idea. You write down fun activities, and then when you're struggling to focus, you pick one to do for a bit.
Oh, that's a good one. I like that.
It sounds kind of counterintuitive, but adding a little bit of play can actually help you stay on track. It's like a reward,
Absolutely.
But what about those of us who like feel like we have zero willpower? I mean, Indistractable talks about that too, right?
It does. And, it challenges this whole idea that some people are just bad at self-control. It talks about studies showing that what we believe about willpower, it actually affects our ability to resist temptation.
Wait, so you're saying if I think I have no willpower, I'm actually more likely to give in?
Yeah, pretty much. These studies Nir mentions, they found that people who believed they couldn't fight cravings, they were more likely to relapse.
Whoa.
Even if their physical dependence was lower than those who thought they could resist. Our mindset, it really matters.
That's kind of mind-blowing.
I know, right?
Okay, so we've covered internal triggers, but what about all the stuff coming at us from the outside world?
Yeah, the constant bombardment.
All those pings, notifications, distractions.
Yeah.
It feels like a never-ending battle.
It is. And Nir, he really gets how tech companies use these things to keep us hooked on our devices.
Yeah.
He talks about like push notifications and how they exploit our need for novelty, that ding. It triggers a dopamine rush, so we want more.
And then there's the infamous infinite scroll on social media. It's like designed to keep us scrolling forever.
It's crazy, right?
Ah,
It's all about understanding how these companies are playing the game. Once you see the tactics, you can start to, like, fight back.
which is where that whole hacking back part of the book comes in. There are some seriously creative tips in there.
I know. I love that part.
I was particularly intrigued by the story about the nurses, wearing those bright vests in hospitals.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That's such a cool example of how a simple change can make a huge difference.
Right.
So they wear these vests that basically say, "Don't interrupt."
Yep.
And it actually helps them reduce, those life-threatening medication errors.
It's amazing.
It's about removing those triggers that can cause mistakes.
Makes you think, like, what other simple changes could we make in our own lives?
Right. What were some of your favorite hacks from the book?
Well, some are surprisingly simple, honestly, like setting your phone to do not disturb
Yeah, yeah.
or creating a distraction-free desktop. Nir even designed this special Indistractable wallpaper. It's just like a plain black background with an inspirational quote.
I love that. I'm totally going to try that one.
Yeah, it's all about minimizing like visual clutter.
But what about all those articles and videos online? The ones that, suck you down those rabbit holes. I'm so guilty of that.
Oh, me too, me too. For those, Indistractable suggests apps like Pocket
Oh,
to save articles for later,
right.
and this thing called multi-channel multitasking.
Multi-channel multitasking.
Yeah, so you pair something you have to do, like exercise, with something you want to do, like catching up on those saved articles.
Oh.
It's like a win-win.
So we're basically removing the temptation by planning ahead.
Yeah, it's about, taking control.
Yeah.
Instead of letting those distractions control you.
Speaking of taking control, the book also talks about pacts.
Oh, yeah, the pact.
Like a way to really solidify your commitment to being indistractable. What exactly are those about?
So pacts are like precommitments
Okay.
that make it harder to, give in to distractions. There are effort pacts, which make it harder to do the distracting thing in the first place, like putting your phone in a lockbox or using an app that blocks certain websites. And then there are price pacts, where you actually put money on the line.
Wait, so you're betting on yourself to stay focused? That seems intense.
I know, right? But it can be really effective. Nir talks about this study from the New England Journal of Medicine, and people who made a price pact were way more likely to quit smoking.
Wow. That's actually pretty convincing. I guess when you have something to lose, it makes you take it more seriously.
Definitely. It's all about leveraging loss aversion. We hate losing more than we love winning.
So true.
So, we're more motivated to avoid losing something, even if the potential gain is, smaller.
That's fascinating. Okay, so we've covered like a ton of stuff already. Internal triggers, external triggers, time boxing, pacts, all sorts of hacks for staying focused. But what about our kids?
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
It seems like everyone's panicking about screen time these days.
It's definitely a hot topic. And, Indistractable dives into the parenting side, too. It acknowledges those scary headlines,
Right.
but it encourages us to look beyond the surface.
So it's not just about taking away their devices then.
Exactly. It's not just about that. The book argues that we need to focus on fulfilling these things called psychological nutrients in our kids' lives offline.
Psychological nutrients, what are those?
So these are things like autonomy, competence, and relatedness.
Okay. And how do they connect to all this tech stuff?
Well, think of them like essential needs, that all humans have. And when kids aren't getting enough of these in the real world, they're more likely to look for them online.
So if a kid's, I don't know, feeling left out or like they're not good at anything,
Yeah,
they might turn to their devices to feel connected or like they're achieving something.
exactly. It's like using technology to fill a void.
That makes a lot of sense. So instead of banning all tech, we should focus on creating a more fulfilling environment for them. Offline, I mean.
Indistractable suggests things like encouraging unstructured play. Like letting them just be kids.
Oh, yeah, like free play.
Yeah, exactly.
I remember reading somewhere that unstructured play is like one of the most important things kids can do.
It's true.
And it's more beneficial than like organized sports or music lessons.
It's where they develop like their creativity,
Right.
and their problem-solving skills and their social intelligence.
That's so important.
It really is. And family time.
Mm-hmm.
Indistractable emphasizes that too, particularly family meals.
Oh, yeah. There's something special about sitting down together as a family for dinner. No phones, just conversation.
I know,
It's
right?
like a ritual, you know?
It is. It's like this little pocket of connection. And the book talks about these studies
Mm.
showing that kids who have regular family meals, they have lower rates of, well, a lot of problems,
Really?
like depression, drug use, that sort of thing.
Wow, that's pretty powerful. It's like those simple moments together, they really matter.
They do. And those strong family connections, they can also help reduce the need for kids to seek that connection through their devices.
So it's like a buffer almost.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so it's not about demonizing technology. It's about building up those real life connections
Exactly.
and having honest conversations with them about how to use it responsibly.
Right. Communication is key.
Like, remember that story about Lori Getz?
Oh, yeah.
Her dad took her bedroom door off after she spent a whole weekend on the phone ignoring her family.
It's an extreme example, but it shows how important boundaries are.
It's about finding that balance, right, between embracing the good parts of technology and making sure it doesn't take over.
That's it. And we need to help them understand it's not about the device itself. It's about making conscious choices.
Right, not letting it control their lives.
Indistractable talks about this idea of like a cycle of responsiveness at work.
Oh, right, we touched on that earlier.
It's this pattern where we feel like we have to be always on,
Yeah.
you know, and it just leads to burnout and stress.
Hmm.
And then, ironically, we end up even more distracted.
It's like a vicious cycle.
Totally. And Nir says this isn't just bad for us.
Right.
It's bad for business, too.
Makes sense. When you're constantly distracted, you can't do your best work.
Exactly. We're less productive, less creative, and it creates this whole culture of like stress and resentment. Nobody wins.
So how do we break this cycle? What's the solution?
Well, Indistractable offers some really solid solutions. And the key is being proactive,
Okay.
both individually and as organizations. One of the first things is setting clear expectations and boundaries around communication.
So instead of expecting people to be on email 24/7,
Right.
we need to be more realistic
Right.
about when and how people are expected to respond.
Exactly. It's about respecting those boundaries.
Right.
And creating like a culture of psychological safety.
Yeah.
Where people feel like they can actually disconnect.
Without getting in trouble.
Exactly.
And it's about shifting our mindset, too,
Right.
from being reactive to being proactive. Instead of just reacting to every single email or notification, we need to be more deliberate.
So true. It's about, taking control.
Speaking of taking control, there's this really fascinating case study in the book about Slack,
Oh, yeah.
which is kind of ironic, right?
It is.
Because, it's a platform that's designed for communication,
Right.
but it can also be a huge source of distraction.
Totally.
But here's the thing, Slack, even though they build a tool that a lot of people blame for distraction,
Yeah.
they have this amazing work culture that focuses on focus and well-being.
That's amazing, isn't it?
It is. So what's their secret? How do they pull that off?
Well, one thing is leadership sets a really good example.
Okay.
Bill Makaitis, a former exec there, he talks about how he actually schedules time for email and Slack. So it doesn't like bleed into his focused work time.
Wow, even the people who made Slack are mindful about how they use it.
It just shows you even the best tools can be distracting if we're not careful.
That's so true. It's not about hating tech, it's about learning to use it in a way that works for us.
Exactly. And it's not just about individual habits at Slack. It's woven into the company culture. Their headquarters even has a slogan, work hard and go home.
I love that.
It's like a reminder that work-life balance is possible.
Right.
And actually essential for both productivity and happiness.
It's a message that more companies should embrace. But it's more than just slogans, right? There are actual, systems in place.
Totally. They use their own technology to facilitate, open communication and feedback. They have channels for everything.
Oh, I've heard of that.
Yeah, from work projects to lunch plans to pet photos.
Oh, that's awesome. I guess those designated channels, they keep those random side conversations from derailing a meeting.
Right, exactly. They provide structured avenues for communication, so it actually reduces distractions and creates a more efficient and productive work environment.
Brilliant. What other organizations could learn from that?
I think a lot. It's about being intentional, setting boundaries, and creating a culture that values focus and well-being.
That's really well said. Okay, so we've covered work, family, even relationships. But there's one more area from Indistractable that I want to get to. finding your why.
Ooh, yes, that's a good
It's
one.
like it goes deeper than just managing distraction,
Yeah.
right? It's about purpose and meaning.
Exactly. It's about understanding, like, what truly motivates you. What gets you out of bed in the morning? What gives your life meaning?
That's some deep stuff.
Hmm.
But I can see how knowing your why could make it easier to stay focused.
Absolutely. When you have that strong why, it's like a compass guiding you through all those distractions.
Like a filter,
Yeah, yeah,
helping you prioritize.
right. And finding your why, it's not like a one-time thing.
It's a journey.
It is. It's about always checking in with yourself,
Mm.
reassessing, making sure you're living by your values.
So it's not about being perfectly indistractable. It's about striving for a more meaningful life, being intentional.
You got it. That's what's so great about it. It's a journey,
Mm.
not a destination.
And there's going to be challenges.
Definitely.
Times when we get distracted, times when we forget our why. But it's about coming back to it,
Yes.
reminding ourselves what matters.
I love that. It's like a message of hope, you know?
Right. It's empowering.
We have the power to choose.
Yeah.
To choose how we spend our time, how we spend our attention.
And by connecting to our why, we can create a life that's both fulfilling and meaningful.
So well said.
Okay, so we've explored a lot here in this deep dive.
Mhm.
The psychology of distraction, all these practical strategies from Indistractable, even some bigger questions about purpose and meaning. But before we wrap up part 1, I want to leave you with this thought-provoking question from the book. If you could only work on one task for an entire year, what would it be? Think about it. What project, what pursuit, what goal would be so compelling, so meaningful, so in line with your why that you could dedicate a whole year to it without getting sidetracked? It's a powerful exercise. It can help you figure out your priorities
It really can.
and see what really matters to you.
Yeah, what are you truly passionate about? What would you pour your heart and soul into?
We'll be back with part 2 after a quick break.
It really makes you think, like, what would you choose if you had that kind of focus?
It does. It's easy to forget the big picture when you're like drowning in daily stuff. But let's get back to the book. We were talking about technology and relationships.
Right.
Indistractable suggests that even when we're together, like physically, our devices can create distance.
Oh, absolutely. There's even research on it. Nir Eyal talks about phubbing.
Phobeme.
Yeah, it's like phone snubbing. Basically, studies show that just having a phone nearby during a conversation, it can make people feel less connected.
Seriously?
Yeah. Less empathy, too. It's like those devices are little attention vampires, always sucking away our focus, even when we're trying to be present.
Like they're these black holes of connection,
Yeah.
just sucking the life out of our interaction.
Right. But hey, the good news is we can change that. We have the power.
Yeah.
Indistractable is all about being more mindful, especially in relationships, setting boundaries, creating those tech-free zones, making an effort to really be there with the people we love.
It's funny, What if we treated our phones like house guests?
Ooh, I like that.
We wouldn't let a guest just barge into a conversation or like demand all our attention, would we?
No, definitely not. Maybe we need some house rules for our devices, just like we have for, actual people.
Right. No phones at the dinner table.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about personal distractions, but work is a whole other beast.
Ooh, tell me about it. The pressure to be always connected, it's insane.
It is. And Indistractable tackles it head on. Remember that cycle of responsiveness we talked about?
Brutal.
That feeling that we have to be available all the time. It leads to burnout, stress, and then, ironically, even more distraction.
The worst part is it's not even good for anyone.
Right.
Nir argues that this cycle, it hurts us and it hurts businesses. We end up less productive, less creative when we're constantly distracted.
It's like we're stuck on a hamster wheel, just going and going, but getting nowhere.
That's a perfect way to put it.
So how do we break free? I mean, Indistractable has some solutions, right?
It does. It does. Being proactive is key, both as individuals and as whole organizations.
Okay.
One of the first things is setting clear expectations and boundaries around communication.
Right, so we're not expecting everyone to be glued to their email 24/7.
Exactly. It's about creating a culture where people feel comfortable disconnecting without, fear of repercussions.
And it's about changing our mindset, right?
Yeah.
Moving away from that constant reactivity. We don't have to jump at every notification.
Exactly. We can be more intentional. We can choose how we spend our time and our attention.
That's so powerful. And speaking of power, there's this case study in the book about Slack.
Ooh, yes, Slack. Kind of ironic, isn't it?
Right. It's literally designed for communication.
Yeah, but it can be a huge distraction if you're not careful.
Exactly. But here's the thing. Slack, they have this amazing work culture.
Right, they prioritize focus and well-being. It's wild.
It is. How do they manage that with a tool that some blame for distraction?
Well, they've got a few things going for them. For one, leadership sets a good example. Bill McKitis, he used to be an exec there. He actually schedules specific times for email and Slack.
Wow. So it doesn't like take over his whole day.
Exactly. Even the people who created Slack, they're mindful about using it.
That's so important. It shows that it's not about the tool itself, it's how we use it.
You said it. And they encourage that mindset throughout the whole company. At their headquarters, they even have this slogan, work hard and go home.
I love that. It's like a reminder that work-life balance is possible.
Right. It's essential, both for productivity and, being happy.
It's a message that more companies should get behind for sure.
Yeah.
But it's more than just slogans, right? They have real systems to support this culture of focus.
Oh, absolutely. They use Slack itself to create structure. They have dedicated channels for different types of communication. It minimizes distractions and streamlines everything.
So no more random side conversations derailing meetings.
Yep. It's about clarity and intention, creating a sense of order, even in the digital world.
That's so clever. I wonder what other organizations could learn from that.
Probably a lot. It's about being intentional, setting boundaries, and creating a culture that truly values focus and well-being.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Okay, we've talked about work, but what about kids and technology? That's a hot topic these days.
Oh, yeah. Everyone's freaking out about screen time.
Mm,
But Indistractable has a really interesting take on it.
it does.
It acknowledges those concerns, those scary headlines about screen time, but it encourages us to look deeper.
So it's not just about taking away their devices or setting strict limits.
Exactly. The book reminds us that distraction, it's often a symptom of a bigger problem. And when it comes to kids, it often comes down to unmet needs.
Right, like those psychological nutrients we talked about. Autonomy, competence, and relatedness.
Exactly. When kids aren't getting enough of those in real life, they're more likely to try to find them online.
So a kid who's feeling disconnected or like they're not good at anything, they might turn to video games or social media to fill that void.
You got it. It's like they're trying to meet those needs, those basic human needs, through technology.
That makes so much sense. So it's not about demonizing the tech itself. It's about making sure their lives offline are fulfilling.
That's the key. Address the root cause, not just the symptom.
So how do we do that? How do we make sure they're getting those psychological nutrients they need?
Well, it starts with simple things. Giving them opportunities for unstructured play. Letting them use their imaginations, explore, be kids.
Like free play. I remember reading that it's like the most important thing they can do, more than organized sports or music lessons.
I know. It's when they develop so many crucial skills. Creativity, problem solving, social skills, all that good stuff.
And family time. Indistractable talks about that too, right? Especially family meals.
Absolutely. There's something magical about those shared meals. No phones, just conversation and connection. And there's research to back it up. Kids who regularly have family meals, they have fewer problems down the line. Lower rates of depression, drug use, all sorts of things.
Wow, it's amazing how powerful those little moments can be.
I know, right? It's like a built-in support system.
Uh,
And it helps them feel connected so they're less likely to seek it out through their devices.
it's not just about screen time limits then. It's about giving them a fulfilling life offline.
Exactly.
Having those honest conversations about how to use tech responsibly.
Communication is so important. Like that story about Lori Getz, remember? Her dad took her bedroom door off because she was spending all her time on the phone, ignoring her family.
It's an extreme example, but it makes you think about those boundaries and how we talk to kids about tech.
It's about finding that balance, embracing the good points of technology, but making sure it doesn't take over, and teaching them how to make conscious choices.
Right, so they're not just slaves to their devices.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about work, family, but there's this one idea from Indistractable that really stuck with me. Finding your why.
Ah, yes. It's a good one.
It goes so much deeper than just managing distraction. It's about purpose, meaning, all that good stuff.
It's about figuring out what really makes you tick, what gets you up in the morning, what makes life feel worthwhile.
It sounds almost philosophical.
It is, kind of. It's a journey of self-discovery. And Indistractable encourages us to go on that journey, to ask ourselves the big questions, like, why are we here? What do we want to do with our lives?
Those are some heavy questions. but I see how knowing your why could help you stay focused.
Oh, totally. It's like this internal compass, guiding you through all the noise and distractions of the world, helping you make choices that are aligned with your values.
Like it filters out the stuff that doesn't really matter.
Exactly. And, finding your why, it's not a one-time thing. It's an ongoing process. We have to keep checking in with ourselves, make sure we're living authentically.
So it's not about reaching this perfect state of being indistractable. It's about like striving to live a more meaningful life.
That's the beauty of it. It's a journey, not a destination. There will be times when we get distracted, when we lose sight of our why, but the important thing is to come back to it. Remember what truly matters.
It's encouraging, you know? We have the power to choose, to be
Yeah.
more intentional with our lives.
That's what I love about this book. It's empowering. We're not just passive victims of the distraction epidemic. We have agency. We can decide how we spend our time, our attention, our energy.
And by connecting with our why, we can create a life that's both fulfilling and meaningful.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So to wrap up part two, we've gone beyond just those tactical tips for managing distractions and really dug into the deeper stuff: intentionality, purpose, creating a life that's truly our own.
And we've explored how to be more present and mindful,
Mm.
both in our personal lives and in our work.
Right, and we talked about the importance of connecting with our why. It's like a guiding principle, helping us navigate this crazy world of distractions.
It is.
And in part three, we're going to get practical again.
We are.
We're going to dive into Indistractable's 4-step plan
Yeah.
for actually putting all these ideas into action.
I'm excited.
Me too, me too. All right, so we're back, and we've covered a lot of ground with Indistractable.
We have.
We've explored the psychology of distraction, those sneaky triggers, both internal and external. Even talked about, like, the deeper stuff, purpose and meaning,
Yeah. It's been a pretty deep dive.
It has. But now, let's talk about the how-to. How do we put all this into practice? Indistractable gives us a roadmap for that, right?
It does. It does. The last chapter has this clear 4-step plan for becoming, well, indistractable.
Okay, I'm ready. What's step one?
So step 1 is all about mastering those internal triggers. It goes back to, understanding why we get distracted in the first place. What are those uncomfortable feelings we're trying to avoid? Once we figure that out, then we can find healthier ways to cope.
Okay, so instead of like mindlessly scrolling when I'm stressed,
Right.
maybe I go for a walk or, I don't know, do some journaling or even just like take a few deep breaths.
Exactly. It's about being more mindful, and choosing a different response, taking back your power.
I could see how that would be huge. Okay, so we've got those internal triggers under control. What's next?
Step 2 is making time for traction. This is where that time boxing thing comes in.
Time boxing, we talked about that, right? It's about planning your day based on your values, not just your to-do list.
Yes, exactly. You're scheduling your day based on you, relationships, and work, making sure you're spending time on each area in a way that reflects what's important to you.
Right.
And it's being proactive. You're designing your day instead of letting distractions design it for you. Like, if family time is super important to you, you actually block out time for it, just like you would a meeting at work.
It's like taking back your calendar, taking back control of your life. Okay, so we've mastered the internal triggers. We're time boxing like champs. What's step 3?
Step 3 is all about fighting back against those external triggers, all those notifications, pings, distractions that are constantly trying to grab our attention.
Bring on the Indistractable wallpaper and the do not disturb.
You got it. It's about creating a distraction-free environment, both physically and digitally. Declutter your workspace, silence those notifications, use all those tips we talked about to minimize those external triggers.
I'm noticing a pattern here. It's all about taking control, being proactive, making choices. It's not about like hating technology or anything.
No, not at all. It's about using technology in a way that serves us instead of the other way around.
Right, like we're in charge. Okay, step 4, what's the final piece of the puzzle?
Step 4 is preventing distractions with pacts. Remember those effort pacts and price pacts?
Yeah.
This is where they come in. It's about like solidifying your commitment, making it harder to give in to distraction.
Okay, so things like putting your phone in a lockbox or
Yeah.
using an app that like penalizes you if you go off track.
Exactly. Or even, making a bet with a friend to hold yourself accountable. It's all about using psychology to our advantage.
It's amazing how much those little things can affect our behavior. Makes you realize we have way more control than we think.
That's exactly it. And that's what I love about Indistractable. It's about empowering us to take control of our lives, resist distraction,
Yeah.
create a life that's actually in line with what we care about.
It's inspiring, honestly. It gives you hope, like, we can actually do this.
Exactly. And, it's not about being perfect. There will be times when we mess up, when we get distracted,
Yeah.
but the important thing is to keep trying, to keep practicing.
It's a journey, not a destination, right?
That's it.
Well, I think that about wraps up our deep dive into Indistractable.
It's been fun.
It has. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling pretty fired up to put all this into practice, to be more mindful, more intentional, and, maybe a little less distracted.
Me too. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And for our listeners, I hope you've enjoyed this deep dive too, and I hope you found it, helpful, inspiring.
Remember, you have the power to choose. You can choose to be present, to be focused. You can choose to be indistractable.